Well, hey guys, welcome back to season 5. And I'm excited about my brand new episode, a new season, and what a way to start off, especially the fall. We're back to school. And as if parenting wasn't stressful enough, parents in 2022 are wading through entirely new challenges that did not exist for any previous generation. My son still can't believe that I did not have the internet in college, which dates me, but we are now drowning in digital entertainment and distractions. Kids are literally addicted to and spending hours each day staring at screens and taking in images and messages from who knows where. But it doesn't have to be this way. What if what our souls need more than anything right now is a digital detox? So today I'm sitting down with Molly DeFrank to talk about her new book, Digital Detox. She helps families reset and intentionally unhook from technology. The results of her 2-week digital detox have been amazing. And I'll just be honest, guys, reading her book inspired me to embrace my own digital detox. I told her earlier that I just got back from being out of the country where I didn't have TV. I was very limited in my cell service and I didn't have a headache at all. Most of you know, if you follow me for some time, that I had a car accident 2 years ago and I've been plagued with headaches since. And I did not really put two and two together how much of that was being affected by overstimulation through noise, through television, and through screens. And so after I've been home the past couple of days, getting back on my phone, like we typically all do, I watched a movie with my husband. I have had 2 headaches back to back. And so I was able to see firsthand that this book is not just for families and parents, although if you are a parent or a grandparent, I really want you to lean in. You're going to learn so much today. But even as adults, we are constantly overstimulated and our brains need to unhook and reset. And so Molly is going to help us to do that. She's the founder of the online Digital Detox, where she helps free families from their addiction to devices. And I'm going to include myself in that. She has a degree in international relations, and she worked as a press aide for former California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I will refrain from using any of the typical accents, but I know she's probably going to share a little bit about that too. These days, she's a stay-at-home mom and she's a foster mom to 6 kids ages 12 and under. So this episode is for all of us, but especially for parents who know that screen time for their kids is the easy way out and they're tired of their children being grumpy or distracted or disobedient or dependent on tech. For any of us who want to prioritize our family time and remove the temptation and distraction of technology, or we just don't know how to unhook from technology and we're fearful, to be honest, of the outcome. So Molly's going to help us walk through that, answer those questions, and just reset and embrace a healthier, more flourishing life as we all want to make our life matter. So Molly, welcome to the podcast. I'm so honored to have you here today.
Hey, Angela, thanks so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Absolutely. Well, you've inspired me today as we are chatting. I have begun a 2-week social media and screen and detox, and I'm minimizing my phone screen to text just to check in a couple of times a day. So I was personally really inspired by everything that you shared, and I was shocked by some of your statistics and facts that we're going to talk about in a minute. But this was birthed out of your own experience as a family. So I would love for you to just walk us through that, your heart for family, and how you came to realize a digital detox was needed.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, I've got 6 kids at the time of our detox. I had 5 and I was homeschooling 2 of them, a 2nd and 3rd grader. We had 2 3-year-olds in the house. One of them was a new foster placement and life was very busy. And I really relied on that technology, that digital entertainment, just to get things done around the house. I felt like I needed it. And the kids would ask for it a lot. And like most parents, I didn't see anything inherently wrong with it. So we would monitor and set the timers 1 to 2 hours a day of interactive screen time. We thought that was very responsible. And frankly, it was along the lines of the recommendations, but we still saw these effects after the screen timer went off. You know, when it was time to transition the kids from a screen to not a screen, we'd see meltdowns or these behaviors, these amped up sibling fights. My kids are incredible. They're wonderful kids and they have so many gifts, but it felt like something was off, like I wasn't getting the best of them. And so I'd get these nudges over time, but life is busy. And most parents, we notice it and then we kind of move along with our day. And finally, one day, I came home from running errands, and one of my kids, my kids were at home with a babysitter. One of my kids greeted me at the door, not with "Hi, Mom." I didn't even get like "Hi, Mommy" or "I missed you." It was just, "Can I play on your phone?"
Hmm.
And it just put such a bad taste in my mouth. I called my husband at work and I said, "Hey, I think we need to pull the plug all the way. I think we need to just go cold turkey and unplug them." And he was immediately on board. He said, "I'm all in with this thing. If you're the one who has to bear the brunt of this every day, most of the day." And so we told the kids that night at dinner, and they lost it. They were so sad.
Hmm.
But we didn't present it like a punishment. We presented it like, "Hey, we're going to try this new thing. We're just going to see how it goes." And there were a lot of tears. And so on the outside, we were a united front, everything was great. But on the inside, in my mind, I was terrified.
Hmm.
And that spot is what holds a lot of families back from making a big decision to do something like this, because it is scary. A lot of parents are working from home, or they're homeschooling, or, whatever it is. This is how we get things done. Even those little breaks that moms need throughout the day to maintain sanity, or to read their Bible, or whatever it is, you sometimes rely on these digital electronic babysitters. And so that fear is really where I like to help parents, because I've been there and I know that it's scary. But the good news is that what waited for us on the other side of that fear was complete and total transformation in my kids. It was like flipping a switch. We got our kids back. It was like we removed this filter. The next morning, they knew, don't even ask for a single screen. It's a non-starter. And they didn't. They played longer, independently, and more cooperatively. We enjoyed more quality interactions with our kids. We got to see their creativity explode. Their reading levels exploded. It was like we just removed this numbing out filter, and now they had to troubleshoot their own boredom and think of ideas. And it was like we got our kids back.
I love it. And I'm just curious, Molly, had you done anything like that personally, or did you go through it the same time they were, you and your husband, or how was that as parents to have to go through it with your children?
So when we detoxed our kids, it was just the kids.
Okay.
And because my kids were 10 and under, it was feasible to do that. And a lot of parents will ask me, "Do we have to do this at the same time as our kids?" And what I say is, well, I'm assuming that you're kind of taking inventory of your own tech use. I'm assuming that you're not going to be scrolling on social media while you're telling your kids no screen time. So we did not. If your kids are young enough, you can do that. But it's also a really good idea to, especially if your kids are older and they're watching more what you do rather than what you say. I really encourage you to have those conversations with your kids about, look, all technology isn't inherently evil.
Sure.
Like, we're using it for so many good things. Parents use it to work, they use it to grocery shop, to make doctor's appointments. And it's just, even social media can be used for a lot of people, for their businesses, to connect with other parents. We're using Zoom right now to have this conversation. So
Sure.
it's a great conversation to help our kids kind of sort and sift through where technology gets really sticky and can bog us down versus where it can be useful as a tool. But all that to say, when your kids are older, I encourage parents to choose at least one aspect of your own digital use and detox alongside your kids. I did wind up at the end, and the last chapter of the book is about this. I wound up giving myself a detox. And it was incredible. The results were wonderful. I had to modify it. I grabbed some friends in with me. I'm like, "Do you guys want to do this together? I'd love to hear what you think." And they were in, and it gave me so much time back in my day.
Mhm.
So it was I mean, it's like stepping on a scale to just kind of measure hey, where do I need to, what can I trim? Where can and just for mental health and just giving me more time to connect with my kids. It was really great.
How often do you digital detox throughout the year? Is this like a once a year that you do with your kids now, or do they kind of do it on their own?
So I say as needed. For my
Okay.
kids, the goal of the detox isn't to eliminate all of it forever. It's to just take a minute, like you're cleaning out a closet and you're putting it in its right place. So the goal is, you're taking those 2 weeks, you're taking it all away, you're unplugging, you're observing your kids, you're giving them opportunities to practice those skills of troubleshooting boredom, of learning where they're talented and wired and gifted by God, and
Mm.
how do they, cultivate those skills and interests so that they can bless the world with them, and so that they can learn and grow and thrive. So Then at the end of those 2 weeks, you're observing your kids, even ask for feedback from them, bring them in on the process. And then the second half of the book is about creating a long-term plan where you're putting technology to use in your home. The beautiful thing is it's going to look a little different for every family. I think that's by design. God is, he pairs parents with their kids on purpose, whether that's through adoption or biology. We know our kids better than anyone else on the planet. And so we get to see some parents find that, especially when you have kids with ADHD or kids from trauma backgrounds, kids are wired differently and they can process and have some of them can't handle as much interactive screen time. We've had kids where 10 minutes of interactive iPad time, they're gone. It's just putting them in fight or flight mode. They can't handle it. So other kids, they can do 30 minutes, an hour of an approved video game and they're fine. And so I say, study your kids, talk with your spouse, put it in its right place, and then have confidence. And as kids get older, of course, more and more seeps in. So if you feel like you want to make it a, yearly thing, or if you just feel like, hey, it's gotten out of whack again, let's do a detox, that's great.
I love it. I love it. And as people are probably even wondering what this all is, if this is new for somebody, just for maybe someone who's even cynical, you offer statistics about the exorbitant amount of time that kids are spending on their phone. I think one of the quotes that you have says by the age some kids are 7, they will have spent an entire year on screens. I went back and reread that. Like, that was very jarring for me. How are, talk about these statistics, Molly, and how are screens putting kids in a bad mood when they're spending this much time on their screens?
Yeah. Well, and it was this kind of research that shocked me to my core when I was writing the book. So we did this kind of backwards. So I tried to put this in reverse order for the reader. So I pulled the plug in a fit of parental frustration. And then I saw these mind-blowing results. And I'm like, what did we stumble into? This is incredible. This is like a new life hack. It's the best parenting decision we ever made. And so after we lived it out for a while, I think we lived it out for probably a year. And then I wrote a book to help other parents because I was helping them in real life anyway. And so I put all of our best tips into this thing. But in writing the book, I was researching it and I was blown away by what I found across disciplines. You've got neurologists explaining how the brain is changing. Let me give you a couple examples of that. Our brains are wired to release dopamine, that neurotransmitter. It's like a pleasure, feel-good chemical that is released anytime we experience anything pleasurable. So if you go for a walk, if you're eating a bite of delicious pizza, whatever it is, dopamine is released. Well, what's happening is these brilliant engineers have taken what we know about the human brain and they've baked dopamine release points into their apps and games that we're giving our kids. So now our kids are receiving, and us too, such excessively high quantities of dopamine in the brain through their devices that dopamine receptors are numbing out because the amount is so high. So that puts us in this situation where, like any addictive cycle, now it requires more dopamine in order to experience the same amount of pleasure that you once had from less dopamine. Now, if you think about that in the context of, well, why is my child bored? Why do they complain about boredom when they have access to, probably your listener can picture in their home bookshelves with books and toys and games and puzzles and all of these things. And yet their child is saying that stuff is boring. Why? Well, there's a physiological reason why. And it's that the dopamine they get from those things is just not as high as the dopamine they're getting from their device. So that's also the reason why when the screen timer dings and the screen has to go off, your child is melting down because you're watching a dopamine crash in real time. Wow. So there is something that has a hold on your child, on their brain. And so that's really important, I think, and encouraging for parents to know that it's deeper than surface level. There's something going on inside their brain. So you're not alone. It's not 100% your child's fault. They're not just throwing a tantrum to be difficult. There's something going on in there. I talked to eye doctors who were telling me there are new vision problems they're seeing. Kids can't recognize as many colors now that they used to be able to recognize before because their senses are being dulled from looking at a screen versus out in nature. Wow. There are just so many things, ER visits. And so we detoxed our kids before COVID, but this was already a problem with kids spending excessive amounts of time online. Before COVID, occupational therapists were saying that they were recognizing a new condition they called virtual autism, which is where kids would come see them. And they said, well, this looks like autism. They look closer. They said, no, this isn't actually autism. It's kids who have not, in those early years, they've not exercised their vestibular system, hanging upside down, going on the swings, doing the monkey bars, rolling around in the grass, all of these things that historically kids have done, and it helps them develop. And because they're deprived of those skills, those learning situations, they're now presenting like they have autism. The brain goes through periods of pruning when these neural connections, if they're not made in these early years, they'll die. Wow. So we really got to seize these windows of time that our kids are learning and growing. And ER visits. So I was kind of talking about younger kids. For older kids, our teenage girls, their mental health is just, it is a disaster. Yes, what these girls are facing. Mm-hmm. So there are just so many across disciplines. You can see it. People are ringing the alarm saying this is a problem. And just to encourage your listener, though, there is so much hope for a path forward in this. We don't have to sit in shame and stress that, oh my gosh, did we do it wrong? Is it our fault? I don't think there's any shame for a generation of parents who have tried a new technology that was billed as an educational opportunity. I bought into the tablets, to these devices to help our kids be rocket scientists. And then when you observe, wow, the marketing didn't deliver on the promise. When you observe that, I think that's great to reroute and make a new plan. I think that's great. And that's what we should be doing. And so we don't have to wallow in that shame. We can just take a step forward and learn what we need to learn and move ahead. And that's why I wrote the book, to give parents a practical path forward. There are so many books out there about this is the problem, and they go into tremendous depth. And I'm thinking, wow, as a mom on the trenches, on the front lines here, I don't have, who has time to read? And I did for the book, but most parents, they're like, I don't want to read about the problem. I see the problem in my house, in my car. Give me a path forward. So that's what I wrote, is how to get out of that.
And however afraid we might be of, oh my word, what are my kids going to do for 2 weeks? And number one, you give us so many tips, practical tips. Like, you've literally thought through every pushback moment we might could give, but what about, and what about, and you just coach us through that so beautifully in the book. But I feel like we should be more afraid, Molly, of what this is doing to our brains and to our children. I mean, they're addicted to dopamine. We are addicted to dopamine. And, the statistics are there. We're not making this up. And so we do need these practical steps. It might feel really scary to unhook and unplug for 2 weeks, but you found that to be the right amount. Don't, try not to opt out, early. And you did mention that, you kind of didn't work as well. You guys regrouped again, did it again. You've had some other parents that share those experiences. I'd love to just at least walk through this. You call it the undo method. And I don't want to give so much away that people don't buy the book, but talk us through these 4 steps. I'll mention it, and then maybe you could just tell me a nugget about each one and why that is so crucial to how this happens. So guys, her method is called the undo method, UNDO. So it's an acronym. And the first is unplug. So lean into that for just a second, what you mean by that, Molly.
Yeah. So the unplug cold turkey, 2 weeks. That's step 1. And it has to be cold turkey. A lot of parents will say, well, what about TV? What about a movie at the end of the day? We're tired. And no, I recommend cold turkey. And the reason behind that is you're using this 2-week window to observe your kids. What do they do? Where do they go? Where do they linger when they don't have the option of numbing out on a device? What are the talents that they have that they're not using? How do they create? What are their how do they play together? And honestly, where do they need to improve? Sure. What are those vulnerable areas? So it's got to be cold turkey. And also for the reasons I was talking about earlier with the dopamine levels, you're bringing those dopamine levels back down to normal real life.
That's good.
So in this window, you're giving your kids a chance to to reawaken a love of real life activities, of real life connection. And if you leave some digital entertainment or some amount of time on the table, that's not going to work. And, there's kind of some of the science behind that we talked about earlier, but practically speaking, and I think this resonates with a lot of parents, is the reason 2 weeks cold turkey is the current setup isn't working. Yeah. Most good parents are setting timers. They're having some parameters, and they're trying to go by the guidelines, and it's not working. Even if you're doing an hour a day, a half hour a day, taking it away, putting it back, you're still seeing negative stuff, negative things.
Side effects. Yeah.
Try that. Yeah.
Plus, we can have natural endorphins. Exercise releases it, relationships, conversation. So it's not like you're just taking everything away and there's no alternative and your child is literally going to be bouncing off the walls. You might have a rough day, and you might want to just constantly reach for your phone if you're an adult like me and you're just out of habit to do that, but it's habit. So if I park my phone and say, I'm not going to check it again until 4 or whatever for work for me, in that case, but we can receive the benefits of natural endorphins that come through so many ways, getting outside, getting D3, getting, some sunshine. So you kind of leaned into the end already, which is notice. You talk about noticing the gifts and even the weaknesses, not only in your kids or in yourself, but even in what those 2 weeks reveal.
Yes, this is the best part of the detox. Parents report back to me all the time. They'll send me pictures through social media or friends of mine would just text me like, I can't even believe this. One woman I know sent me a couple pictures of her kids. They made like a Frisbee golf course in their backyard. She said, I cannot believe they're doing this. It's like 100 degrees outside. And they just took off. They just put their heads together and said, well, what are we going to do? And they created. And so this is the really fun parts for parents, is helping stand in that gap between where your kids are when they're stuck, they don't know what to do, and the possibility that they have to unleash this creativity, and kind of encouraging them, nudging them along, and noticing, where do they get stuck? Where can we kind of be the wind in their sails? If you've got a kid who is into art, that's one thing we noticed in our detox. One of my kids loves art. I didn't really appreciate that. Over the course of 2 weeks or so, his walls were covered in the art that he made. So I started checking out books from the library, how to sketch, how to, all of these things. And he would just eat them up and just go through them so quickly. And I was just thinking, gosh, the opportunity cost of what our kids are not doing when they're being just passively entertained. So this is across the board. Parents find this. I had another mom who her son discovered this like woodworking gifting. She would send me pictures through social media, these DMs of, look at what this child is doing. I didn't know he was gifted in this way. And it's just so encouraging to see that.
Yeah, that discovery process is beautiful for the child and the parent to be aware, which is why if we can limit even as a parent and be more present and observant, we'll pick up on some of these things that we may have missed. I loved a quote that you said, which kind of goes with develop a list, which is talking about the kinds of things that we could do instead of social media and our screens. And just all of the things that go on with screens. But you say boredom beckons creativity, where kids are like, I'm so bored. I'm so bored. And you actually want us to invite boredom because it beckons creativity and makes space for new things that we, instead of filling every single second up. So maybe name a couple of things that we could put on our list as we develop our list of alternatives to screen time.
Yes. And this is where it gets practical, developing that list of screen-free fun ideas, really practical, something parents can pick up and use. After you break the news to the kids, there likely will be a lot of sadness and pushback. You're not alone, and there's help on the other side. But part of getting you to that other side is sitting down with your kids and making that list. Think back on your own childhood. If your kid's grumpy, that's okay. Bring your best attitude to the table here. And I have actually 100 free ideas on my website based, separated out by age too for your kids. But start a book club with your kids. You can do, there's some of my kids made a couch fort, and they made this reading nook under there. And I would get stacks of books from the library, and they would just, enjoy the peace and quiet and calm in there. there are a million things you can do. One of my kids through noticing, we saw that he enjoyed cooking a lot. So I would help him find some recipes or a kid's cookbook, um, and he would just cook for the family. And the sense of confidence and enjoyment he got out of, making something with his hands that could bless the family, it was wonderful. So these ideas, you can start at the front end, and then you can really kind of prune that list as you're noticing your kids, you can help clarify, well, this I think would be a good idea for you. So yeah. And then you've got ideas at the ready. You post that on your fridge. I have a free template on my website to make a list. You can print it, fill it in, print it on your fridge. And if kids are complaining of boredom during your detox, you can be like, hey, you got that list there.
Yep. Yeah, so she gives us all the things. So we eliminate every excuse. There are no excuses anymore after you've read the book. And then finally, it's, open the books. And as an avid reader myself, I love this, Molly. I read when I was younger and just have continued that love for reading. And I love this statement you make: a child who doesn't enjoy books, it's a child who has not yet met his or her genre. Your mission is to play matchmaker. And you even talk about reading aloud and the impact of even a dad reading aloud. So let's just kind of close up this undo with books and how you've seen the value of that. And I know you're a friend of the library. We don't have to think, I'm going to break the bank buying all these books.
Yeah, absolutely. I assumed wrongly before our detox that some kids were readers, some kids enjoyed reading for pleasure, and some kids don't. And I just thought that was that. Well, it's not. It's not that. And I promise you, you can trust me on this, because I don't just have like one or two very docile children who are like following me around, like, please, mom, may I have another book? That is not my life. I have one or two of those who will just devour books. And some kids, it takes a little troubleshooting, a little work on the back end. Yeah. So one of my kids, it took several trips to the library, trying a couple books, it not working out, interest was gone. And, trying another one. I tried this one, I think it was a book about chicken nuggets. I'm like, you like chicken nuggets? I don't know. We're going to like this book. He wasn't into it. And it wasn't until I realized he likes fantasy. He really enjoyed, there's these books, early chapter books that have beautiful illustrations called Geronimo Stilton. There's Thea Stilton, it's about this mouse that likes cheese. It's really cute. But he got into those, and that was kind of like this gateway book for more reading. He also really enjoyed for kids who aren't necessarily into reading, they haven't developed that sustained attention, delayed gratification that is required to read longer books. You start out shorter, get joke books. They read a couple of lines and there's immediate enjoyment, or fact books. National Geographic makes really great fact books that helps your readers to get, oh gosh, this is fun. I blew through a page and I have this great information now in my mind. So there are a lot of ways to hook your kids, and the research behind what reading for pleasure does for our kids, even just in terms of family bonding. When you're doing a read aloud, there is no age limit for read alouds too. We assume that, okay, we stop when our kids learn how to read. No way. Our kids and our families benefit so deeply from reading aloud together, where your hearts start to beat in unison when you share a story together. Your kids go from being rivals to rooting for the same characters, and against the same bad guys in these books. And it's just, we teach virtue in our kids. We're exposing them to characters that they get to admire and want to be like. We can't afford to maybe take an African safari or travel to Japan or, all of these places, but we can afford to go to our library and get free books and immediately transport ourselves into these places, into these hearts and minds of other people, and grow empathy in our hearts. And it's just transformative what our kids get. And those skills, like I was saying earlier, you're helping your kids develop the ability to delay gratification. So it's just, the benefits are mind blowing. And I talk about that more in the book, just to keep you going, because you will, Instagram fools us into thinking when you see a picture of a bunch of kids listening quietly to this read aloud, that's not the whole time, when you start out 8 out of 10 times, it's a disaster, and you keep working, keep at it, keep trying. And then before you know it, your kids are loving it. They're asking when the next read aloud is, but it does take some perseverance from the side of mom or dad, but your investment will repay dividends. So I promise you it's worth it.
That's so good. You even share a story about a time you were trying to read the Bible with your kids and like they're not paying attention and this one is doing that. And you're like, oh my word, can anyone focus? And then maybe a week later, your 4-year-old foster daughter was like scolding the two older boys, like, you are brothers. You're acting like Cain and Abel, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, oh my word, they listened to every word. They actually heard it. So our kids are hearing, and I remembered reading like Jan Brett books to my kids when they were younger, or The Big Hungry Bear, and like just reading and having that time, and it's connection time as well. And then you're giving them a love for reading, which if they read and love to read, that benefits them in every area of life. And so there's so many practical benefits. It's normal that it's going to be rough at moments, both as adults as kids. So let's just accept that normality. But that can't be a reason that we just stop and don't get on the other side of, we can do better than this. Our souls need this. Our families need this. Our brains need this. We're constantly overstimulated. You can't even walk into a supermarket without feeling like there's just a million types of soda. You can't even go down a soda aisle without feeling overwhelmed. So that's one of the reasons I love to travel. Those of you who know me, I travel a lot. It simplifies, it's minimizing, it's embracing discomfort, it's setting aside things that we think we absolutely have to have. And those are all good things. They're things that we should invite and welcome. So Molly, I'm so, so grateful that you have shared your own life experience with us, and you're helping us to make our lives matter in deeper, more meaningful ways. I know you have a copy of Digital Detox there for those that are watching. If you can show them that, and how can people connect with you? I know you have some freebies you just mentioned on your website. Would you like everyone to just visit you on the website? Is that the best option?
Yeah, I would love to hear from you. Come to my website. I've got free stuff for you. When you buy the book, I made a lot of free resources. One of them is how to convince a skeptical spouse. A lot of times, usually moms want to do this thing and husbands are not so sure. But there's good data behind it. I kind of distilled it into one sheet. You can hand this to your spouse, spare yourself the conflict of it, and see if that convinces them. I've got that list template I was talking about, and also ideas for family dinner table topics. I tried all these out on my own kids and they loved it. Really fun conversations. Some of them are deep, some of them are silly. Just ways to connect with your family. But yeah, my website is mollydefrank.com. I'd love to hear from you. You can follow me on social media. I think I'm most on Instagram. Usually I usually try to make the same content and share it across all the platforms. So yeah, I would love to hear from you, and I'd love to hear how your detox goes if you do it.
And Molly shares so many great videos, little nuggets and moments, and she's funny too. So follow her on Instagram. I'll put her website here in the show notes as well. Molly, just as a sidebar, and then I want to ask you one last question before you pray over us. My husband and I pastor a church in Virginia outside of Washington, D.C. And one of the things, we have life groups that run all year. One of the things I felt led to do over the summer was just something I'm calling summer conversations. And so women can sign up for one or more. And I've had just lovely times, in my African themed basement. I've been to Africa a couple dozen times. And so my basement is inviting them to feel transported, or on our back porch or back patio. And we sit around and, have lemonade and chat. And I bought a couple of these games. I had to sift through the cards. They're not all kid friendly, or even like, they're not even all PG, but one is called Our Moments. And I just took out the ones that were, not great, but there were things like, what's one thing that you love about yourself, and what's one dream, that you have not yet fulfilled, or what's one thing that you love to do for fun. And we don't have our phones out at these conversations. We just simply sit and engage around these card conversations. We steer clear of politics, and we steer clear of the typical, so what brought you to the church? I didn't want that. I wanted women to feel like they were genuinely connecting, and to see how rich these conversations have been. It's just reinforcing what you're sharing with us, that we need to get back to face time, to sitting and having conversations. Even the trip in Costa Rica, because we had no cell service when we were out every day, the team was connecting, and we went from strangers to friends in 5 days. And that's because we sat and we actually listened to one another and to our stories and found out how much more we have in common than where we disagree. And our culture is so divisive. And so if we can find ways to connect, truly connect, put our screens down, put our walls down and engage, it's so meaningful. There's so much beauty and depth in it. So anyway, I just wanted to share a couple of personal experiences that validate everything you're saying to us, Molly. And I'll be excited to share, with my listeners and with my social media following, just what this 2 weeks off did for me, because I'm literally starting it today. By the time this airs, I would have finished it. And so I'll share some nuggets of how impactful that was for me. So Molly, I would love for you to pray over our listeners, especially parents who may feel a little bit harried as we're starting back to school. They're trying to navigate everything in balance, all the things, and how they can incorporate this into their lives. But one last question I love to ask all my guests is you're helping so many people to make their lives matter. But other than Jesus, who in the Bible most inspires you, Molly, to make life matter?
Oh man, there's so many good ones. I think I would go there. I have a tie in my brain. So I'm thinking Moses.
Okay.
Just because of the quantity of humans that he was kind of shepherding and guiding and leading. And also I'm thinking about that conversation he had with his father-in-law where he's like, you got to delegate some of this stuff, dude. You're one human person. So I would love to pick his brain at some point. But I'm also thinking Mary, because, we don't get to hear a whole lot about how she mothered. Like, can you imagine mothering a perfect human and then the sibling sort of envy that came? I'm inspired. I'd love to hear some. I guess by the time I get to have a conversation with Mary, it will not be relevant anymore. How these mothering tips. But anyway, those are two people who inspire me.
That I could see why, both of them, especially with you mothering and your heart for parenting and your heart for children, and to see the next generation raised well. I know if we could make a book list of the books we'd like to see, our heroes and heroines in heaven write, I'm sure Mary would be the top of we want your parenting tips. You know what I mean? Like, we want Martha's recipes, but we want Mary, the mother of Jesus. We want her parenting tips. I just finished a book with my dad on the life of Thomas, and it was so just so rewarding to lean into his doubts, his questions, and how we can find ourselves and we can answer our own heart questions through his life. So I'm a Bible girl through and through. And, I just feel like it's so rich. And when we can help our kids to connect their everyday life to the truths of scripture, that's even more impactful. So thank you so much, Molly. Guys, her book is Digital Detox. It's been out now for a couple months because I took a hiatus over the summer. So go get it. I know it might feel scary, like I'm just getting back into school, but that's why I wanted to air this right here in our September, falling back into fall, getting back into the rhythm of things. Consider implementing this and getting your kids going in the right direction. Probably they've been on their screens a lot this summer, and this will be a great kind of reset for you. So thank you again, Molly, so much for sharing your time and your voice and your expertise. And I would love for you to just pray over our listeners as we close.
Absolutely. Father, thank you so much for the gift that technology can be when we use it as a tool. Lord, I pray that you would just help the parents listening, the grandparents listening who are feeling frustrated and overwhelmed. Lord, I pray that you would just encourage them that they can do what needs to be done in order to overcome this, in order to put technology in its right place so that you can be at the center of the home. Father, we just love you so much. We're grateful for the conviction that you give us. We're grateful for the encouragement that we don't have to sit in shame because of what your son did for us, that we get to move forward, that there's grace. And we love you so much. We praise you for who you are and how you design the family, for how you put moms and dads there to guide our kids. And we ask that you would, if people choose to do this and to take a step forward, that you would just multiply the blessings during this time, that you would help families to flourish and thrive and for your glory, Lord. We love you so much. Amen.
Amen.